Let's get corrupted. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Joe with Meteoric Serpents coming back at you with another episode of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. Guys, I hope you're all doing super well this week. If you're wondering why this is a different setup looking, because it is. Had a big life change over the last couple of weeks. That's why I did not do an episode this past week. I moved, like I said I would. So that's fun. Been working on kind of getting everything together. Animals all did quite well on that. Everything made it safely here, which is always great. Unfortunately, just touch on a personal thing, personal collection thing before we get into tonight. I had a cocksie that was gravid, and I knew this before the move. She did lay her eggs, and they were all infertile by the looks of it. There were a couple eggs that were questionable, but they did not look the right size whatsoever. So I don't have my hopes up on that whatsoever. Just, shit happens. It is what it is, but we keep moving on. But, we learned from it. I'll feed her back up, throw the male back in again, and hopefully we get some success later this year. That would be nice. But otherwise, I hope everyone's doing super well this week. Thank you for everyone tuning in already. Live chat's going. But that's awesome. Guys, if it's your first time here or if you've been here before, make sure you're hitting that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're getting close on that 1,100 mark on the subscribers, which is awesome. I really appreciate everyone who's hitting the button. So make sure you do that if you haven't. Again, hit a like on today's video. Set the reminder there on YouTube, so every single time we go live, typically Sundays at 7:30 EST. And then if you listen to this podcast elsewhere, you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, places like that. If you do, please make sure you follow it, download the episodes, and then leave a 5-star review. Write a little something nice. That always helps out the algorithm. And I appreciate you guys. Make sure you guys support USARK Florida. Those are the organizations that fight for our rights to keep our reptiles, whether it's just a hobby for you or a business. You never know when legislation will come through in your area potentially. So always make sure to keep up on that. Let's see. Social media. You can follow me on all my social media platforms down below. It's pretty much at Meteoric Serpents on everything. Definitely. Yeah, Instagram is like the main place. That's where you're going to see everything and where I'm the most active. My Facebook auto posts everything from Instagram, though I'm not as active on the Facebook. I just like getting the message out on both platforms. And then you could go check out the first link in the description below, which is the Meteoric Serpents Patreon. If you want to get a little more behind the scenes of what's going on with the collection, what's up. First access to new episodes. Who the guest is before the public does. When I do pre-recorded episodes with people, you guys get access to that first. Also YouTube videos, which I am planning on bringing back soon. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully we get some good content cooking and I can put some stuff out for you. But and shout out to all the Patreon members currently. It's also, there's a Discord group chat of a bunch of like-minded Colubrid loving individuals. So appreciate you guys for the support. It really means a lot. And let's see, we'll say hello to the chat and then we'll show off our hashtag Colubrid corruption of the week. We got Clint Bartley, of course, Mr. Metazotics, our previous guest. What's up, man? Appreciate you. Got Adam from Ivory Colubrid Co., one of the Patreon members. Appreciate you, Adam. Got Edward, another one of the Patreon members. Thank you for being here. We got Keller. What's going on? We got Solid Serpents. You guys probably did see each other. I know you guys live close. We got Aaron in the building. What's up, Aaron? Thanks for being here. Andrew, also. Yes, it will be a great convo for sure. And we have Justin here. Thank you, Justin, for tuning in. And then we got our hashtag Colubrid corruption of the week. So let me pull that up for you guys. Let's see. Guys, remember, if you want to be featured on a weekly basis, I do, you got to put hashtag Colubrid corruption on your Instagram posts. And yeah, you have a chance of getting featured, getting a little shout out. I'm actually going to follow him here. Bam_reptiles. Appreciate you sharing this. This is pretty cool. It's a neat little rusty black rat snake that's kind of going through its color change. It's just a super interesting color form there. I haven't kept the black rat, so I don't know if this is like normal in their transition, but definitely a cool animal for sure. So yeah, thank you, Bam Reptiles, for posting that. And guys, once again, put hashtag Colubrid Corruption on your Instagram post. You get a chance to be featured on a weekly basis. But yeah, and then let's see. That's about it for the usual stuff. But and if you guys didn't see the thumbnail already, we have on Rob and Amy Zerkle from Zerkle Reptile Co. Very excited to have these guys on. They were a co-panelist with me at Colubridfest last year, talking about the different generations of the hobby. So I knew I had to get them on. It was just a matter of time. And I got in touch with Amy this past week, and she came in clutch because I did not have another guest planned. So really appreciate it. But without further ado, let us bring our guests on for tonight. Once again, the Zerkles. What's going on, guys? How are you?
We're good, thanks.
I'm a little hurt. I was your second choice. I'm a little hurt.
Well, so the reasoning behind that was I wanted to get you guys individually at first, but then Amy was like, hey, Rob will come on if you want him to. And I was like, you know what? Sure. Like, I'm totally cool with that. So I was due for a garter snake oriented episode. It's been requested quite a bit. And I do a lot on Asian rat snakes. I definitely throw a little favor towards Asian rats a lot. So, but no, you have some cool stuff. Amy has some cool stuff. Like, I'm very excited to talk to you guys. And, you know, like I kind of said on the social media captions, like, you guys were part of the forefront of building the reptile hobby into what it is today. You guys started, you know, a while back, like when the hobby was on the ground floor. So, for people who don't really know you too well, would you mind giving a little introduction of how you got into this and how that led to where you guys are today?
Well, when we got married, Amy had always wanted a small independent pet shop of her own. So her parents bought her one. And on display, we had a couple of boas that were on display that came with the shop. Weren't really all that big, I know now, after all the years of breeding boas in the past. And we absolutely lucked out and had them breed on display, only because we went on vacation and our help didn't turn the heat on for a week. So it's like nothing we had anything to do with. But, you know, then we started worrying about this animal because it was blowing up and it wasn't acting right. I even took it to a local vet, had it x-rayed, and he goes, I think it's pregnant. I see all kinds of little spine cords in there. And sure enough, she dumped. That was like 30 some odd babies. And at the time, you know, boas only sold for like 40 or 50 bucks out of the retail end of things. Reptiles were really non-existent in the pet trade in the early mid 80s. You got a handful of things, but nothing a whole lot. And we were like we were starving independent pet shop owners. We're sitting here with, you know, 30 some baby boas going, geez, well, how are we going to get rid of all these things? And we dealt with a fish wholesaler down in Florida by the name of Lou Brando. And Lou Brando is very good friends with a gentleman who just passed away, John Shanahan at Emerald Coral and Reptile, which we'd known for years. And John got a hold of us, and he had done some work with Lloyd Lemke on some projects out in California. And so John put us in touch with Lloyd Lemke out in California, and Lloyd became probably one of our first mentors. And that was the first where, you know, we were trading in box turtles and garter snakes and getting really cool stuff like cow kings and speckled kings and neat shit we'd never seen before. Yeah. And then probably a few years after that, and dealing with Lloyd and kind of, we went out and spent a week with Lloyd and learned how to be snake farmers and all that kind of stuff. That was a blast. And we got word that there was a reptile swap meet in Millersport, Ohio in 1988. And we went up there in February, and we were vending when?
Next month.
The next month we were vending. And that's how I got in so tight with Don Hamper, who by far was probably my most treasured mentor that I had. and that pretty much kicked us off. You know, we were involved with one of the first shows in the country. We were one of the foundation vendors there. So
I remember you telling that story. It was basically like it was a basement, like reptile show type of deal, right?
Well, it started in a guy's basement, and then they moved it to Ohio State University campus. They had one show there, and what I was told was that somebody was walking around with a boa on their shoulder, scared the crap out of the dean's wife. They got booted out of OSU campus and wound up in the American Legion Hall in Millersport, Ohio. And it was a blast. A bunch of old veterans out there, and they had a Coke machine full of beer, and it was 2 small rooms. But, you know, in that room, which is kind of interesting, because I look back at it sometimes, and I look at how many people started back then that were like major cornerstones in the industry now. I mean, Mark Bell was there. John Mack was there. Don Hamper was there. Ed Lukasevic, who developed the Iguana Chow, was there. There was a lot of the.
Was Barczyk at that show?
Brian Barczyk was at that show. Bob Ashley was at that show. So it was just like all these people now that are just such big cornerstones or influencers or took the hobby in a very positive direction were in that little nucleus and community. And it's kind of neat when I look back at it like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, how does it feel to, like, you know, like I was saying, like, be on really the ground floor of turning the hobby into what it is today? And I know you guys aren't like big on social media, and this is a conversation we had at Colubridfest, but like, you know, when people look back on it, they may not recognize you guys as part of that, but you were. So
well, I can remember, you know, when we scraped our pennies and got our first computer, which we still have the same email address that we got with our first computer. You know, we sat and we waited for NOAA notes on Notes by NOAA, which was the Northern Ohio Association of Herpetologists, or the Chicago Herp Society newsletter. And those two had humongous classified ads in it. And back then, you know, you sent some cat a $1 with a self-addressed stamped envelope, and he would send you a price list, and everything about it took forever, you know, to get animals and to get correspondence back. You did do some calling, but, you know, there wasn't a lot of shows or organizations where you could go and get it. So, and then I think that I'm not going to say that it was easier then, but I think that everything was much more of a challenge back then, and you saw so many new things and rare stuff. I mean, I can remember when I walked into Don Hamper's basement. Now he'd been doing this since the 60s. You know, and the first time I walked in his basement, you know, I'm seeing Bismarck rings and Timor pythons and Madagascariensis and Jamaican boas and puff adders and Schlegel's vipers and all kinds of stuff I'd never seen before. Mexican bee. It was like walking into Merton's book of reptiles, you know, down in his basement. So anything you saw or anywhere you went or any place, any collection you got to see, you were just in awe of what you were looking at, because it was all new. And I think a little bit of people today are a little jaded. You know, it's a little easier today, which is a good thing, because so much more stuff is captive born. And so people don't have to go through what a lot of the first layer people had to deal with, you know, and getting stuff established and producing it. But we saw a lot more stuff. It was a very wide open, even at that first swap meet, you know, where there's Schlegel's vipers and boom slangs and, you know, and all kinds of crap sitting on a table. You know, they don't allow that in Ohio anymore, but that first show, it was wide open.
Well, there was no indication it was venomous. And I remember some little kid picking up a deli cup, and my daughter was in the stroller, and he goes to open it, and he goes, "Oh no, we don't want to open that. That's a Schlegel's viper." And then they started putting red tape around it, but that was, you know, nothing. Okay. It was just a cute little yellow snake. You didn't know.
But, you know, also wasn't too far from that. You know, we used to be able to get, you know, squirrel monkeys out of the back of comic books for $9.98 and stuff like that. So it was kind of more of a Wild West, and you got a lot more hands-on learning than maybe so much now.
Okay. So what were some of the species, even back then, that you guys were able to acquire that that kind of put you in the direction of where you are today, whether it's the garters or some of the Asian rat snakes? What kind of jump started the real colubrid kind of track?
Well, we went out to visit Lloyd. He worked with a lot of colubrids in his collection. He had a lot of Pituophis, and he had Transpecos.
Mm-hmm.
He had a lot
all
of kings.
kinds of colubrids.
Yeah, he had all kinds of colubrids, and we had a was that an emerald tree boa that we had?
Yeah.
We had an emerald tree boa for about a week and thought he was the most boring snake ever. We really wanted it. It was like something that we wanted, and then it didn't do anything. So it was very disappointing. And we decided that we liked something that was more interactive at the store. I don't know how we got them, but we had a pair of garter snakes there. And that was way before they knew anything about care. And they were eating full-grown mice, and the female ended up dying from impaction from all the bone and fur. They're just not made for that. So, it was a whole lot of back-ended figuring things out, because Vivarium magazine came out and it was like Christmas. You got it every once in a while. It'd show up and you were so excited to read it cover to cover, because that was the only publication besides, club newsletters that you would get. So it was all a learning curve, and everybody would get together when Daytona started, and it was a show that lasted longer than one day. The Columbus show was just an afternoon, and you were there for 3 days with people, and you just sat around all night and you traded how you incubated your eggs or how you fed this baby snake. And it was just fascinating.
But a lot of my direction, and I've run a gamut. There's tons of stuff that I've read that I love.
Okay.
But due to things that changed lifestyle wise, didn't make it able for me to really do it and do it well and do it successfully. There's a point in time with a collection, and I think Benny Russo is probably one of the best ones I've heard talk about it, to where, you can maximize your production and your effectiveness with working with an animal if your facility is geared towards such. And you can do it a little bit cheaper if you learn to work with your outside settings and your indoor settings, your climate as to where you're at. I used to do a ton of boas. Carpet pythons are one of my favorite snakes to this day. I still breed them. Colombian rainbow boas, I'd breed them to this day if I could. But over a successive series of events, ones that triggered us from moving from Lexington, Kentucky to Columbus, Ohio, we moved into a house where we'd built an entire second story on our house in Kentucky and had a lot more room. When we moved to Columbus, Ohio, all of a sudden I was in probably a quarter of the amount of space.
Or a one-car garage.
We had a one-car garage from an entire story on a house. And I had 3 young kids and not a lot of room, and I'm trying to breed boas and pythons, and I'd had Asian stuff and I always had Asian stuff around. I mean, I've always had trinket rats and Taiwans and stuff like that. I bought my first quad reverse trio, I guess, a Ridley Eye rat from Klaus Schultz down in Orlando in 1990. I had to buy 3 males to get 1 female. And you want to talk about scraping pennies, because we were broke, but I had to have these animals. And
those back then, the price was no joke, especially in those days, dollars. Yeah,
it was up there. But what was funny, it was just a quick story. When I had pulled together one of the first animals that Amy ever bought me as a gift was an amelanistic corn snake from a retail pet shop in Louisville, Kentucky. She paid $200 for this thing. It fit in a ring box. Mm-hmm. And I raised that animal up, and I mainly obtained a few more. And we vended the first Orlando show in 1990.
Okay.
And dude, I went down there and I felt like the cock of the rock, buddy. I had probably 20, 25 AML corns, and I was going to kick ass and show everybody who I was. Mm-hmm. And then I met Gary Sipperly, who's a big colubrid breeder from out west. And Gary has 28-quart Rubbermaid boxes of per 100 AML corns behind his table, stacked 10 high. And I'm like, what in the hell am I doing here? This is a joke. He put me in my place really quick, that maybe in Lexington, Kentucky, I was a big shit, but nationally, nothing. But once we moved up here, space-wise, temperature-wise, we're kind of very similar on the same longitudinal, plane as Asian and European stuff.
Right.
my facility stays on the cooler side. And it just, due to some other events that happened up here in Ohio, I just decided that I was just going to work with what I liked. If nobody wanted it, it wouldn't be the first time, because I've bred some of the same stuff since the 90s, and nobody wanted it then and nobody wanted it now. And really, it really didn't kind of take off and be anything that anybody seemed to care about till maybe about 10 or 12 years ago. Maybe it got really hot to let's hate on ball pythons. We hate tables with ball pythons. We want to see tables with anything different. And here I am, as my buddy up in Canada put the last time he was down visiting from Tenley, he said, I can't believe you still breed the same cobra foods you've bred for 20, 30 years. Yep, I still do. And then everybody noticed it. But until then, I've always just bred what I like and stayed the course, and it eventually comes around, But that's, I think, is the first, and the nice thing is that the younger generation has more out there that they can get into than we did when we got started. So, you can start right now. If you woke up and decided you wanted to do Asian rats, well, there's plenty of guys out there breeding captive born Asian rats, and you'll have a positive experience with it. Mm-hmm. Or garters, you'll have a positive experience with it. Mm-hmm. Whereas before it was a crapshoot. So,
well, you buy wild caught, and I mean, I'm sure if you deal with wild caught, you buy 20, you might get 3 to live, and they'll all be males, and then you have to buy another group. Hope you get a girl. So, I mean, that's just they're usually held, and they're not fed or watered, and they're emaciated, so they're really hard to get started.
But I think Amy's interest in garter snakes started on a day I was sick and wasn't in our retail store, and she saw a garter mating out behind the store. So,
well, I was sick, and we had this pet shop, and if you went out the back door, there was a hill, and they had a big culvert came out of that was near the roadway, I guess. And apparently the garters were denning up around that big concrete, like 3-foot tube. And I went out the back door, and the whole hill was covered in garters. There were thousands of them, and they were rolling down the hills the size of beach balls. And I didn't know, and I knew Rob wouldn't believe me. So I rolled one of those balls into, how big is that garbage can? 56 gallon? Yeah. Mm-hmm. 56 gallon Rubbermaid garbage can. I just rolled one of those balls in it, and I put the lid on. It had holes in it. We were a pet shop, so we always had something in there. And I told Rob, I go, you won't believe all these garter snakes that are out behind the store. Well, he ended up coming in, and by the time he got there, like an hour later, they were pretty much dissipated. You saw a few working through the grass, but not the billions that I saw boiling out of the ground. But that garbage can was literally half full. Just that one ball, I just rolled it in there. And I thought it was fascinating. So after that, we started, and it was hard to find garters. Most everything was wild caught that you would get. So it was sort of a slow process, except for checkereds. There were albino checkereds that were available. And then I met Dr. Ford, and I got some granite checkers. He wrote the Garter book. Really nice fellow that was at Texas A&M University. But he was a really good resource and very helpful. And I just find them they're like the colubrid. They're very interactive. They're very personable.
Like goldfish.
Yeah, they watch you. They beg. I mean, they're very intelligent. And I think that they're really overlooked. A lot of people considered them food snakes for a long time. And, people gave me crap about having them, but I always liked them and I enjoy them. So we never chased $1. We've never bred a ball python. Rob always liked Asian rats. They were kind of up his alley. He wants something kind of feisty that he has to figure out how it works. And so we just do what we like. It's a very eclectic collection.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And talking about the garter snakes, I mean, even now, I think Clint, ran the numbers on the latest CCR episode. Like, there just aren't garter snakes available whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Not many.
Yeah.
Well, they're a lot of work. They're a lot of work. Yeah. And like a lot of other species out there, like gray banded kings and things like that, I think the people that breed garters grossly undervalue them. They're a ton of work.
Well, it's really interesting. When I take baby garters, I don't take them until they're 3 or 4 months old. And by the time that they go, they're, usually eating chopped pinkies and chopped fish. And they're only half the size of a newborn corn snake. And everybody goes, oh my God, they're so tiny. And I'm thinking these things look huge, because when they came out, they look like a piece of yarn, and they're like, 10 times bigger than they were. But, they don't realize what it takes to go from there to where they are when they get them. They want to buy, you know, a full grown adult for the price of a baby. And it's really frustrating that a lot of people don't figure out that it is a lot of work.
Well,
And
a lot of people can't equate a worth to something that they see in their yard. You know,
Right.
I've had people tell me, "Oh,
I
I can get these in my backyard," and I'm like, "Well, these are Oregon red spots. I don't think you're going to find them in the backyard of Ohio."
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, there's so many garter snake species out there that I think people don't realize. I don't even think I personally realize how many are out there and all the different kinds and types of color forms they could come in and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, they're a really interesting group of snakes. They have that intelligence factor, like you guys mentioned.
They do. And they're easy to feed. You don't want to feed rodents. They're versatile. They'll eat chicken livers. They'll eat frozen fish. They'll eat rodent. You know, we always feed hairless pinkies or rat pups. But I mean, they're very easy. If you don't want to feed rodents, you don't have to. So for a kid that wants a snake, you know, his mom can get him one and they can feed him other stuff. It doesn't have to be.
But I kind of almost think it's a double-edged sword when it comes to garters, because people see something small and they think it's easy to take care of, but it's not. Right. It's easier and quicker to kill it if you do something wrong with it. So,
well, you can't drop them, and you know they're more sensitive to temperature. And
the United States, that's one reason why I believe that ball pythons have exploded to the point that they have, because you know there's been plenty of research on it, and we're a supersized community. Bigger is better, you know. So in someone's eyes, if you had a ball python for $25, you had a baby garter for $25, they think the baby ball python is a much better deal because it's a bigger animal. So I think that kind of hurts garters a little bit, but they're a lot of work. I usually tell a lot of people,
for a single one, it's not so bad, but if you're doing, you know, you got 400 or 500 babies, it's every other day, 2 or 3 hours every other day.
Well, they're an animal I think does much better in more than one. They're very social, and I think that they'll do much better in one. And a lot of times, we used to breed pancake tortoises years and years and years ago. And pancake tortoises are very communal by nature. And a lot of times if we hatched out a single baby and didn't have other ones there, you know, we'd have to stick like a baby Eastern box turtle in with it.
We did.
To spur it to feed, you know, to spur it to come out of its shell and decide it wants to eat. And garters are much the same way. So Amy can take a granite checkered, which is not a, you know, hard garter to deal with, and put it in the middle of a bunch of red sides or something, and that thing will spur them into eating in a heartbeat, because one of them sees one of them eating and they all got to come and see what he's eating.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But then you got to sit and bust them apart and break apart fights and cut it in half, and you know, the food item in half. And so it does. Gotcha. I tell people be real careful about getting too deep in garters, because unless that's all you've got and that's all you want to do, they are a very time consuming animal.
Yeah,
in numbers.
You do have to be careful about, you know, I just had a friend that had her female eat a male. She would put him together to breed him and wasn't watching, and she ate him, because the females are so much larger than the males, much like hognose. Right. The males are only 12 to 14 inches and the girls can get up to 3 feet. So it's a big disparity.
Yeah. And in terms of difficulty of like keeping, is it because they have a fast metabolism and they eat so much and you're constantly feeding them like bits of food all the time and cleaning up after them? I'm sure. Is that kind of the deal?
Yeah, you got, you know, they have got, and there's some Asians out there that have got garter snake metabolism. That's what I always tell. Anything with fast metabolism has a garter snake, because everything they should be fed, in my opinion, and I tell people this a lot, their digestive system is really not designed to break down large amounts of hair and bone. They're primarily a soft diet animal, you know, nestling rodents and frogs, tadpoles, toads, you know, small stuff, night crawlers,
fish.
And so when you got a soft bodied feeder item like that, it don't take long to break that down. You know, they'll break it down, and 2 days later they're ready to eat again. You know, and
not like a regular snake that you feed, you know, every 5 to 7 days, and you just wait till it digests and then you go again.
And I think Amy feeds babies damn near every day.
Every other day.
She usually keeps them in small groups, and just to ensure. And then you'll start getting some that will outgrow others, and you have to kind of move and split up and stuff like that. But they can be a lot of work, and that's one reason why we kind of moved away from some of the larger birthing type garters. Like you can get into Kansas red sides, it'll throw 70 babies, that are,
Oh shoot. Okay.
you know,
In one litter?
yeah, 70 babies in one litter
Oh my
that are
God.
like a thread with eyes.
Yeah.
And then you have to also look at it as on a commercial standpoint, how long is it going to take me to get those animals big enough that I can put them in somebody's hands that they'll have a positive experience with? It takes a lot of time with animals that small. And then the state of Ohio makes it virtually impossible for us to work with Easterns and Plains garters, which are two of the biggest on the market and have the most morphs in them. But we can't. They want us to pit tag babies when they're at 10 inches. You'll kill a garter if you shove a pit tag in it at 10 inches.
Gotcha.
So we don't deal with Easterns and Plains. So wife's kind of trimmed her group down. She does kind of looking for stuff that throws smaller litters of bigger babies. So she does a lot of Oregon red spots, which I think she can have all the Oregon red spots she wants. I think they're just a great garter.
They are. They're very calm.
Yeah.
There's some Western blacknecks. I've got a group of Chapalas, the Mexicans that might be ready to go here this summer.
Very cool.
Granite checkers and albino checkers.
Mm-hmm.
So they're such an interesting group of animals. Rob wants to get some more of the Mexican garters. He likes a lot of those. But it's it's always kind of hunting and pecking around to find them. And now there are a few that are captive bred, but for a long time there weren't.
But for me, it's like there's like three big giant forms of Mexican garters, all in that same taxonomy bracket. And the one thing that I find the most intriguing about that, which is stupid, is that in the middle of all the three of the biggest forms of garters there's also the smallest garter in the world, which is the scaliger. And I think that's fascinating to hear the littlest one is in amongst all these giants. Is there much commercial value on a scaliger? Probably not, but that's an animal that I key to because there might be 4 people in the United States that care about it. And that's, I find that fascinating about scaligers. But
gotcha.
Cali red sides, you can have all those. I have no use for Cali red sides whatsoever.
Yeah. They're just very hyperactive and everybody sees them and they want them because they're pretty. But I tell everybody that I talk to that I really kind of hold those in the esteem of like fish. You set up a really neat terrarium and you watch them, but they tend to be on the hyper side and they like to poop and bite. And it's just not a positive experience. Whereas I can put somebody with a Consensus garter, one of the Oregon red spots, in their hand, and it's really calm and docile. It eat out of your hand. They come right to you, and personalities are so different. I have a friend in Chicago that has 1,000 corn snakes that she breeds, and she got 1 pair of Callies, and she cusses me every time I go to Tinley and tells me it's all my fault she got them. And I told her when she got them that they were going to be hyper, and her female just ate her male. She put them together for breeding and took a phone call, and the female ate the male. And so not only are she's aggravated because they're aggressive, but now she's missing her male. So it's I tell everybody they're like supermodels. They're beautiful and people put up with them because they're so pretty, but they're not going to be your, I'm going to sit and watch television and hold you kind of a creature.
Right. And Amy, if you don't mind, can you kind of go through the gambit of your general care for your garter species between temps, enclosure size, feeding, things like that? Kind of everything you do, if you could give a little scope about that.
Well, I think the biggest misconception is that garters need to be in a wet cage. A wet cage tends to lead to a lot of skin problems with garters. I would prefer to keep them on the drier side. So mine are either on a mulch type bedding that's dry with a water bowl. They have a basking light on one end, water bowls on the opposite end. Their room temperature with the basking light is probably the light's at about 82. I've just started playing with some of those Arcadia UVB type lights and putting those on cages to see how I like that. And it's interesting that they seem like they do go to that to bask. They'll have a regular basking light and one of those with a piece of cork bark. And I try to offer them multiple places to get a piece of cork bark or plastic type hide. But the big thing I think that people have a lot of issues with is keeping them too wet. And then they end up with blistering, get a lot of skin issues with that.
Gotcha.
So ambient room temperature with basking light. You can give them a heat pad at night if you want to, especially for gravid females. I think they utilize it more. But you'll see them definitely cluster under the heat light during the day. They're all breeding now. So it's been very exciting time. They're all excited and not really interested in eating right this minute.
Okay.
Feeding for babies. Babies I usually keep in the plastic pet keepers. I think they call them reptile keepers. They're kind of flat, about yay big a size. Yeah. The flat ones that have more surface area, not the tall ones.
Yeah.
And I like to keep about 10 to one of those on newspaper or paper towel with a small little water dish, so I can take the paper out when I feed them to make sure everybody's eating. Kind of have to sit and watch them, and I'll have 4 or 5 boxes around me. And if I hear somebody slapping their tail, I know they've grabbed the same piece of food. Try to mince the food up till it's about the size of their head, so there's not a lot. Garters are sort of snappers. They grab it and they swallow at the same time. So if it's something really long, like a noodle, and you have a single snake, that's one thing. But if you have multiples, they'll tend to grab it from each other, and you can get somebody swallow somebody else, just like you would with a king snake. So making sure the food's appropriate size, so they can't do that if you're cohabiting them.
Gotcha.
And sizing is commensurate. You know, it would depend. Most of the Oregon red spots, is that like a 30 breeder, 40 breeder?
Those are 36 by 18 by 18 exoterra. She does not want to be a garter snake tubber, which is fine. I don't think they do well in tubs anyway.
Right.
So I've been building her rack systems with 36 by 18 by 18, like exoterras that she's keeping all of her adults in now. And she typically splits them up in the summer, sex wise. You know,
I was gonna say, are you keeping them together? Like, are you cohabiting pairs full time, or what's kind of the deal?
No, it's always usually the same sex. Right now, the pairs all the adults are together. You know, I have them in groups, but I like to keep the males separated from the females. I think they're more interested when they go together. We usually keep them separate till after we put them into hibernation, and then while they're down, we'll put them back together, which is what they would do in the wild anyway.
There's a fair amount of skranking that goes on in hibernation as well, or brumation as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we find that with a lot of animals, that a lot of times if you put them to get down together after they're asleep, that they'll have those, you know, and we've had really strange winters here where you have a couple of warm days, and even the mandarins, we'll hear them slapping tails in there, and we know that they're copulating. So it's a garter to do the same, and then bring them up, separate them, feed them, and then after they shed, start putting them back together again.
But she'll usually around early summer, she'll split them up. You know, when she starts seeing noticeably gravid females.
Yeah, when I see the girls start basking, I split the boys off, because they don't really, the boys especially aren't very interested in eating when they're around the girls. A lot of snakes are like that. So once you take them away, they'll go ahead and feed. A lot like rubber boas do the same thing. They get so interested that they don't want to eat. Hognose will do that too.
But they'll work well in a group. You know, for just anybody that wants to take care of them. But I do stress this. I am horribly opposed to any kind of hybridization of any type.
Yeah.
If you want to keep a sorority of garters or frat house of garters, they're fine. They don't care. You can keep 10 or 20 of them together, but make sure you're working. If you're not interested in breeding, and even if you are, don't cross them together. But, you know, keep a whole tank of males of 6 or 7 different kinds, and it's a lot of cool fun to look at, and they'll do just fine. But make sure if you're going to do that and you're just keeping them as a hobbyist, make sure that you know, if you keep 2 or 3 of them together, just make sure they're the same sex.
And don't turn them loose.
Even though they're a garter, you get bored of them. Please don't turn them loose. And don't introduce a wild one to them.
No.
You know, don't go catch one in your backyard and stick it in a cage with them. Right. But yeah, I'm just not. I don't want to see any checkered Oregon red spot crosses on the market.
Yeah, that'd be horrible. I mean, inadvertently, sometimes it happens, I'm sure. But, you know, with working with Asian rats, I'm sure you know, people cross up stuff all the time. And then the second or third owner doesn't know what it was crossed with. And all of a sudden you have a bunch of Taiwan beauties. So, which you know don't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rob fights that battle a lot.
Every day.
Everybody knows I know Taiwan beauty. Mm-hmm. And he'll say, no, you don't.
What even is it like? Chinese Taiwan cross?
Well,
Probably.
you've got there's a fair amount of stuff that comes in from overseas, over in Europe. In fact, I was just talking to a friend of ours over in Germany here not earlier today, matter of fact, and I was asking him about some animals that I wanted to get a few more from him because they were tracked back to Klaus Schultz, and he goes, I got out of breeding them. I'm not going to fool with them. There's no interest in them over here. Now I see a lot of people bring stuff in from overseas and over in Europe, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I know that they are not that interested in that stuff over there, but it bothers me and concerns me when I see people selling, platinum Taiwan beauties or platinum albino Taiwans or albino Taiwan beauties. Now, being the kind of guy that I am, I can sit there and go, well, if somebody was really on their game over there and really wanted to maximize flooding this market with animals, which I don't buy, what better way to do it than to take visual morph male Chinese beauties into female Taiwan beauties, and you'll increase your clutch size by about threefold, and you can get 2 or 3 clutches a year. And if you do that enough where you're producing these color morphs, I don't know what's coming over here, if it is truly a cross or a Chinese, but they're always tagged as Frisia and Taiwans. So I just don't like, so I don't buy anything from anybody. There's about 2 people I would buy beauty snakes from, and that's it.
Well, there was a whole problem here. One of the big concerns in Florida was mixing them all together because the guy who was in charge of it was being paid by the production, not paid by what he was doing. So they just made a whole bunch of mixed up stuff and called them beauty snakes.
Yeah, eventually I talked him into just selling them as beauty snakes. I don't think he's in the business anymore, but just put them on your table as beauty snakes. But I mean, I have seen Mullendorf Ridley eye crosses. Really? I have seen, and to be honest with you, when the guy showed me the first picture of those, I was like, damn, that's a cool snake. Till I found out what was in it. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, that sucks. Now he's passed on, and there might be some of his animals floating around, but he said he had a male. He lived down in Florida. Said he had a male Mullendorf at Bird Broomstick, and he could never find
a big female.
A big female Mullendorf, so he bred them with Ridley rats. I've seen Ridley rats cross with blue beauties, and it's just, it's just that whole group of animals is confusing and messed up enough. Right. I've actually reached out to the Genetic X place and told them that I was going to flood them with every morph of Chinese that I have. And I've asked a couple other people that have things to send them to me, send me some sheds. And and I didn't really think about it. I have a morph down there I'm working with. It's called a Sun Glow. And it's been very difficult for me to establish it. And this year, because breeding 2 visuals together, I was having very little luck. Might have scrawny babies and failure to thrive. And it wasn't a morph. I don't care how cool it was. I wasn't going to put it on the market. And then I outcrossed it with some normals. And this will be the first year I'm breeding hets back to a visual.
Nice.
But I sent them a skin, and then I was talking to Clint, I think it was, and he's like, well, they may not be able to tell you a whole lot about it because they don't have a library, built up of enough samples. And I'm like, well, let me freaking fix that. Because I got about 40 of them downstairs of probably every color morph around. And I said, I will flood them, and we will hopefully, with their help, figure a lot of this stuff out.
Yeah, it's great. Honestly, I started collecting some Texas rat sheds over here to help with the whole Pantherophis complex. And I'm just gathering those sheds up. And when I get a nice little collection of them, I'm going to send them off as well. And a couple of corn snakes too, to help with that bit. But yeah.
Wow, that'll be one to unravel. That'll be a bunch of sheds on the corns, but they gotta get the samples, so they can build their base. So
well, they came out with I think it's like 3 or 4 corn snake tests. So they have 3 or 4 corn snake morphs so far. I know they're working heavy on hognose right now. Corns and hogs for sure is what their goal is first, but I think just the research itself they're very interested in. So
Well,
they're kind of asking for anything and everything.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, if I could get the morphology, and I asked them, I go, I can send you, sheds from other subspecies that don't necessarily, because you may have to have those to determine if an animal is a cross or not originally.
Right.
If I can do anything to help them get the Oreothrophis complex unmuddied by the time I die, I'm a happy guy. I did my part. But but I think and that's the problem with like a lot of the Chinese, and particularly in the amellinistics. There are 4 or 5, and I keep telling people this, but I'm usually talking to people that don't recognize it, haven't been around long enough, or don't know. I know in the 90s, like Ridley rats, we were just happy to get a couple of them stay alive long enough to breed. We didn't give a shit where they were from. We were just happy they stayed alive.
Nobody cared.
And I know back in the 90s, there were a lot of integration between the subspecies because I don't think they were even broken down. And there was a point there in the late 80s to early mid 90s that there was a ton of people bringing stuff in off of the Chinese food market. Now, you really don't have any idea where this stuff was from. And that's why I don't hold locality in very high regard, knowing how animals are collected and how many hands they pass through before they get sold, before I ever get to lay my eyes on them. But there's probably 4 or 5 different phases of amelanistic Chinese beauties out there.
Yeah.
And I've had all 3 of them or 3 or 4 of them thrown in a single litter. And I think that some people can inadvertently want to call them maybe a T negative or T positive because they look very different, but it may be their background. Do they have McCordi in them, which was a hot thing to do back in the early 90s when we had McCordi. We don't have McCordi in the U.S. anymore. But when there were supposedly McCordi here, everybody wanted to cross them together. And so I think that if you've got animals, but it's almost impossible to track them back that far. But if you're getting some influence from stuff that was possibly, put into them in that line 15, 20 years ago, it may throw you different looking animals. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a different morph. I mean, out of this one litter of amel Chinese I've got down there, I've got one that looks like the original first albino I ever saw down in Florida. And it was the ugliest chicken meat, off-colored snake you'd ever seen. And then some of its litter mates are bright, stunning yellow. So it varies a lot in litter. And I can't sit here and tell you, I mean, I know that I believe I'm breeding Chinese. I'm breeding Chinese together that have all the right traits. Key out is Chinese, but if they got influence in them somewhere in 20 years ago, I can't control that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the Chinese, the beauties are real cool. It is unfortunate that crossing has happened. I know it has with multiple species. Obviously, we've seen it with the North American rats.
Right.
And there are probably people that don't know it happens in the Asians as well, but it does.
Well, more than likely too, on the edges of the range, they probably mix.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're willing breeders. You get a country butt up to each other, you might have a couple of them that'll naturally breed in the wild.
Make a small pocket of population.
It's just with those countries, it's just too hard. They don't geopin every rock or every bush they pulled something out of when they shove all 50 animals in a sack, and drag it down the hill and dump it to a dude that's going to unload them into the food market where he throws them in a vat with all the other ones he's gotten. It's just very difficult to pinpoint a locality on a lot of the stuff. You just kind of got to go by who you're getting it from. I can sit here and say, I will absolutely positively don't care if somebody offered me a ton of money for it. Will I ever cross any subspecies that I believe that I have this straight? And I hate to have anybody and see anybody else do it. I've seen it. I do it. So that's why I tell people with beauty snakes that, and I'm the world's worst self-promoter. If you get into the beauty snake market, and I don't care if you buy them from me or you buy them from Clint or you buy them from Larry or I don't care who you buy them from, but buy it from somebody who produces this stuff.
Yeah.
So you at least hopefully know that you're getting what you want and can give you a background of that animal, not something that's changed hands 3-4 times. You don't know what you're getting. You just want a pet, you'll get it. But
Yeah. Rob, why do you think the Chinese beauties are more popular? With all these color morphs and all these
I
other
don't think
things.
I don't think they are. I think Chinese beauties have never been a popular subspecies of beauty snake. Right now,
Yeah,
blues
and
are
I'm
the most popular one out there.
yeah, and I'm saying like with all the color morphs, like
Mhm.
why do you think they're not getting to that next level of
I don't think they're promoted.
a
I don't
more
think
desirable?
I don't think they're promoted, and a lot of times with me, like when I do Tenley and stuff like that, and I've told people, and you probably heard me when Clint and Zach interviewed me. Beauty snakes are like a koi fish. They don't all look the same,
Yep.
and babies don't look like much, and you have to give them time to develop into what they're going to develop into, and it's going to, I've seen just some people show me some blue beauties that they bought from people as babies that are green and yellow, and as babies you go, oh man, that's going to be one ugly blue, and they shape up after 18 months or 2 years, and they really start looking like they're supposed to. So you have to give these things time. But for anybody to stop in their tracks and look at a bunch of baby beauty snakes, they're just not going to grab them. It's not going to stop them. They don't look like they're getting anything. And then it's very difficult for me, I would say my herd of assorted beauty snakes is probably somewhere up around 80. I can't take an adult of everything that I have. I've tried of every color morph that I have, and
Right, and bring it to every show.
yeah, to show people what all they look like. And Chinese are a little higher strung, but
Okay.
I try, and I'm probably my own worst enemy because I need to break my camera out and actually take some decent pictures because I'm old and I'm lazy and I use my phone and the pictures look like crap. But I just think that it's and it amazes me too how many people out there tell me how negative a time they ever had with a beauty snake, and I'm like, I don't understand that. I mean,
You're either too hot or not.
it's either
not
too
feeding
hot
enough.
or you're not feeding it enough, or
Right.
it's almost impossible to get these things as wild caughts anymore. They don't come in hardly to speak of anymore. So, but I think somebody really should come out and do a really good, up-to-date, comprehensive book on Oreothropus, and they would catch on.
They would.
But all the information that you get now is either it's very taxonomy based, like Klaus Schultz's book, or any of the stuff from the 80s is so outdated, or 90s, and so outdated it's all garbage.
Right.
But if somebody could do a really good comprehensive book on them and dedicated a channel to them, they'd probably take off. But it's like, I'll be, my beauty was so mean and nasty, I couldn't hardly ever touch it. I got 80 of them down there that I touch maybe once a week. Right now, it's just throwing them in from one cage to another, and I rarely ever get bit. They're not that nasty. Yeah. I don't know why they've gotten that moniker, but they're not that aggressive by any means.
It gotcha. It's it's interesting what you said there about literature and them in it. And what I find today is like you're right. We don't see a lot of newer literature about a lot of these animals, and like there are books like Klaus's books, but those are extremely limited books and they're expensive. Your brand new herpetoculturist is not going to go out and spend the $200-300 on Klaus's old books. And obviously there's some taxonomy information that has been updated.
And as much as I love that book and I sleep with it under my pillow, it doesn't have a whole lot of info about basic care. It's very quick to,
yeah.
But yeah,
and then someone would have to basically almost copy and paste everything that Klaus wrote and then try to add to it.
Right.
Kind of.
Yeah. Well, you can't. You can't contradict his work in the field, and where the things were found and where things were located. That's kind of like I'll get people that'll ask me from time to time about the Grabowski that are on the market. If you look at Klaus's book, he doesn't have a picture of a Grabowski but one that almost looks like what we're getting in, and you can't really tell anything about it. the one picture he's got labeled as a Grabowski eye is a blue, is a Vietnamese blue. So, are they Grabowski eye? I don't know. I can't tell you. I've never been in the field.
They call them Sumatrans.
We kind of,
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with a lot of the European cats that we'll call them Sumatran cave racers. I would like to think that maybe it's an undescribed subspecies, maybe, or a geographical variation of something. But
okay,
when they first started hitting the market, hey, is this a Grabowski? They sending me pictures, and I'm like, I don't know. I've never seen a baby Grabowski in my life. I don't know. Now I've got them, I've bred them, I've seen babies, I know what they look like, but when the only reference that we have, is to go and look at that book, we can't pull anything off of it. It doesn't really help us a whole lot. When you talk, and I've talked to a couple of collectors over there that tell me that most of them are coming out of the Batu Cave regions, and they're all coming out of the Batu Cave region. So, it's hard to say. I'll play along and call them Grabowski eye now until somebody who's a lot more intelligent than I am determines what they actually are. But I don't know if they are or not. We so rarely get anything new, in the Asian old world market. It's very exciting. It's very neat to look at. I'm a completist collector, so shit, I had to have them. I don't care what they were. They were a beauty snake. I had to have them. But as to what they truly are, I'm not really sure yet.
Okay.
So, yeah. But there needs to be somebody come up with something more updated. I had somebody reach out to me at one time, and they wanted me to help them write a book on the morphs, primarily of Chinese beauties. And I'm one of the only reptile breeders out there that will tell you that morphs and genetic is not my strong suit. And I am not the guy that likes to breed this to this and see what I get. I'm just not interested. I'm the kind of breeder that I'm happy to breed calicos with calicos and make pretty little calicos and throw amels to amels and pretty little. I mean, I don't need to go out and try to throw the first and try to be the first and try to create some. It just doesn't interest me. Keeping the animals healthy, happy, producing them, making little snappy little babies. That's what I'm all about. That's what I like. And I like to know that when I put this thing in somebody's hands, that of all intent and purposes, it should be what I'm telling you it is. It's not, it's not got a pedigree behind it because I can't remember everything that's in it.
Yep. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Another major one in your guys' collection, Mandarin rat snakes. There are species that I wish we saw more of on the market too. They're just so cool. The color range they could kind of scope through is super interesting. I know out of the Asian stuff, they are a bit on the more sensitive side in terms of like temperatures and stuff like that. You want to kind of talk about your Mandarin collection and what you're doing there?
Well, in my opinion, a Mandarin rat, once you get it eating as a baby, is one of the easiest animals I've ever taken care of in my life. The best way to take care of Mandarins is leave them the hell alone. They don't want anything to do with you. They're very secretive and fossorial by nature. And Mandarins, I have just gotten lucky. Well, I got unlucky a couple years ago because we had a water main break at Christmas Eve and flooded and blew up all my racks because I had old school melamine thread racks with Cambro boxes in it. And the room that I kept them in never probably got above 70. And I gave them no extracurricular heat. And here I was at Christmas Eve. We come in from shopping. We got 8 inches of water in our basement floor. And the water sprayed right on all my melamine racks, which has exploded them. And most of my snakes are in 6 inches of water that's ice cold. Half of them are being electrocuted by electrical line that was also getting in the water. So to tell you how sensitive these animals are, I have probably at that time, I've trimmed them down a hair, but I'm going to say I had about 52 adult Mandarins. All right. Every cage I had got destroyed. Not like I got 52 cages sitting around anywhere that's not got nothing in it. I had to take those things by the handfuls after being in frigid cold water and electrocuted and shit for I don't know how long. I don't know how long the line broke when we left. The only thing I could do was take them in my main room and throw them right into hibernation. And that's what I did.
Okay.
We went right in. I threw them in groups of about 6 or 8 of them in tubs, right down on the floor. And I think I lost one out of the whole thing. And they bred that year.
Wow.
So they are not that hard to deal with, but you just have to understand what they want. You know, they're an animal that, you know, is not always going to work in the system that you want them to work with. And their care is different. And a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around it. I developed a way that I do babies, and I can let wife tell you about that because she takes care of all the baby stuff. Go ahead.
Well, the biggest thing with them is that cool and damp is the key word. And, you know, when you're dealing with ball pythons or other colubrids in general, you have a warm room. Well, they don't like to be hot. So 70 is really the top end for them, 70 to 72. If you get way up in the 75, 77, they start getting frantic and trying to get away. So they want to be cool and damp. And Rob puts them in those 8-inch deli cups, the big ones, or 6-inch to start with, the water cup full of sphagnum moss. And they live in there. And I put on top every time they eat. And they stay in there for 6 to 8 months. And they're very happy in there.
If they're mine, they'll stay in there for their first year.
And I give them, and Rob started giving that cup to people when they buy one and saying, you know, you can go put this in your cage. And I'm going to tell you that you're not going to be able to see if it eats the pinky. Because if you put it in a big cage and you have a little snake, you know, you're not going to be able to find it if it ate or not. And he said, if you can't tell if it's eating or if it's not eating, put it back in here. It feels secure. It's going to be happy. It's going to eat. And when it's really confident and you feel confident but knowing about it, then work it up to something a little bigger.
But in her room, I've actually taken a picture and posted on Facebook where I have a temp gun and I'm shooting them. I've gone down on the floor and they're at 68 degrees.
Eating.
And they're eating and they're happy as a lark down there. But to tell somebody, take this animal, put it on your counter, don't give it any heat or whatever, they can't handle that. Or they want to take it and throw it in their, their 24-inch Exoterra bioactive cage. And then every time they want to feed it, they got to dig it up. Well, it ain't going to eat because you scared the shit out of it. So when you get tired of chasing it around, put it back in a 6-inch cup. And most people look at me like I'm cruel and stuff, but if they're mine, they're going to stay in that cup for a better part of a year. You know, and then maybe
I remember. Yeah. I remember when I met you guys or when I came up to your table at Colubridfest and I saw them like that, and you told me that, I was like, no way. I was like, that's
they're
so
all written on top of the cup when they ate.
Yeah, but they're, you know, they're very, once you get them established, and if you just meet their minimal requirements, was, you know, the way I set them up. All my adults are in Cambro restaurant boxes, which are probably about the equivalent of a 28-quart Rubbermaid, except for a couple of the Vietnamese, which the Vietnamese get a little bit larger. The Saupo Valleys get a little bit larger. Yeah. And then in those, I use a coconut and one of the coconut chip Reptibarks, moss hybrid where I mix it up and I put it in the cage where it's dry. And then I have these small, they're clip top Sterilite boxes that are about 8 by 12, like you stack papers in. And they're only about 3 inches high. And I cut a hole big enough to hold a 16-ounce deli cup in it, and I cut a small hole for them with a hole saw for them to climb in. And that box is all damp, super damp, wet sphagnum moss.
Nice.
And I give them, you know, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to find them in that box or under the box, either or. Okay. But they have the ability to get out of that damp. You know, if they want to be, they can be in a drier area, they can be in a damper area. And then, but Mandarins are very similar to Garters, you know, because, and old worlds in general, you know, when you go, it's what I talked about before, and we touched base on, is when I moved here, finding a collection that all worked. Everything that I do has to like the same setup. They have to be able to, that's why we do, you know, we're kind of phasing them out, but we do rubber boas and we do black milks. They all like to be cool. They all like the same kind of environment. You know, I don't try to breed Colombian rainbow boas in my main room. If it doesn't want to be 75-degree ambient or cooler and wet, it doesn't go in that room.
Well, we tried when we first moved here. We had the room divided in half.
Yeah.
trying to keep this half hot, let this side get cold down. It was just too difficult.
Yeah.
So we had to make the decision of which direction we were going to go.
And I just got tired of kind of trying to jam square pegs into round holes. And so everything likes the same setup that I have. It all has to like it. Now, caging might be different. I've actually started using a few cages now versus tubbers, because I am a tubber. That's how I was taught. Most of my stuff's in oversized tubs. But I have brought out a few cages this year, using them on primarily my European species. There's some stuff that I haven't liked overall over the last 10 years with the European stuff and using the tub rack type of system. So I'm trying them in cages. And so far, I'm about 50-50 on it. I like the animals. I don't like keeping them together, because I'm breeding them and keeping them together is just a pain. It's a time killer. But the Mandarins, I'll have a lot of people like, I want to work with some Mandarins. Okay, well, what do you work with now? Ball pythons. Well, they're not going to like that room. There's no point in me selling them to you.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you just give them, once you get them eaten, and I strayed away from my point. But when you're dealing with old world stuff, if you choose to keep them on a cooler side, you've also got to change your thought process when it comes to feeding. So you have to feed smaller meals more often. So like my Mandarins, I might feed an adult Mandarin, say 3 fuzzy mice, or 2 or 3 pup rats, because they're sitting at 72 degrees. And, I've got some Vietnamese that can eat, big crawler pup rats, but I doubt they could digest it in time, because it's as cool as they stay. So smaller meals more often is the way you want to look at doing old world stuff. You'll be a lot better, and your animals will be a lot healthier, as well.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I know you guys have worked with rhinos too. Those are always a popular one on here, especially with myself as well. What have you guys done in the last few years or so with rhinos? I know you've had some for sale and stuff. So, and speaking of, the caging and stuff, how have you been keeping those? Have you been doing tubs with those? Have those moved to racks at all? Or I'm sorry, to cages?
I have kept my rhinos the exact same way as I keep my Mandarins.
Okay.
They're in Cambro boxes. They have no ability to climb. They have water bowls, which they'll sit in them probably 23 out of 24 hours a day. I had a friend of mine over one time that said, if anybody would told me the snake will eat laying in this water bowl at 60 degrees, I'd tell them you'd lost your mind. I go, well, welcome to rhino rats. That's what they do. Now it's kind of been bouncing around in my brain that I would not mind moving them into, I'm doing some moving around in my rooms right now, and I wouldn't mind moving them into something like an 18 by 18 by 18 Exoterra, something that they could climb a little bit. There's something that's a little bit off, I still get eggs. I probably get 3 or 4 clutches of eggs a year. I typically keep equal pairs on rhinos, and I run them in pairs. I don't try to do 1 male and 3 females. So I think I've got about 7 or 8 pair down there. And, but there's some things, because if you look at enough rhinos, and I haven't really figured out exactly what it is yet, I think it's a locality thing, but you'll see some variations in the overall look of rhino rats. Now the new Heinens come out, or Heinen, or however you pronounce that. And basically it's like any other rhino rat, except it's got a split labial scale on it. It's about the only difference, or ocular scale. And I've actually got a couple of them down there, but I mean, it would be, in my opinion, because I don't know their background and I've never separated them to breed them myself. I will never produce a Heinen rat. I'm not going to breed them and call them Heinens, because I can't guarantee that that's what they are, just because they got a split scale. But when you look at some rhinos, there are some rhinos out there that tend to have a slim build and a very matte green finish. And then there's some rhinos out there that are I have a lot of very blue influenced rhinos in my collection. But I'm not all gung ho about the blue ones because I believe, and it's kind of just a theory that I have that I can't really find a foundation for. But I think overall you'll find more green type animals as you get into more and more generations. You'll start seeing more and more blue. Now, is that a dietary difference? Is that a lack of UVB? Who knows?
Well, we saw that in Plumifrons basilis.
Yeah, we used to breed
for green.
Yeah, we used to breed Plumifrons basilis a lifetime ago. They were bringing them in like 80s. In the 80s and 90s. These big, beautiful 3-foot males.
Green, but the babies were blue.
Babies were always blue,
and they never turned green. They stayed blue. Yeah. So
interesting. And then when you start looking at like Barren eye don't occur blue in the wild that I'm aware of. They're brown and they're green. But now in captivity, we have blue ones. You can't import a blue one, but we have blue ones. So I think that you'll see a little bit more blue influence in these animals as you get more and more generations of them. But there's some difference in build and overall color on the rhinos that I can see, from one to the other. But I don't have any way to determine, if it's a locality thing or generational thing.
Right.
But typically, when I breed rhinos, their care is very similar, like I said, to mandarins. The hardest thing I have about rhinos is finding anything they'll damn near lay their eggs in.
They're terrible.
They're horrible. I have not found anything they're happy to lay their eggs in. And one thing I found with rhinos I think is kind of neat, and I'm sure other people have observed it, that their eggs are slightly adherent, and they'll lay them up off of the substrate.
Inside the hide box.
Inside the hide box. And they'll like stick them to the wall. And I think that's because they're such an aquatic species that maybe gets them a little higher above the water line or the water table.
And how many times have you picked up a hide box?
Yeah.
Damn.
I'm like, damn, she didn't lay, and they're stuck up around the top of it. I'm like, oh shit, this is like breeding days again. But if your rhinos are being sluggish about breeding, and I'm a huge proponent of don't ever put all your eggs in one basket on a lone male. I will throw my males in and let them beat on each other for about 15 minutes.
Really?
And they will combat, and they will kill each other. If you're not careful, do not leave them alone. But I have seen them. I have a picture of them where they are wound up like a corkscrew from the neck all the way down to the tip of the tail.
Yeah, you can send it to me.
And one of the other of them is going to die if you don't separate them. And then, you introduce the females or run them into your female's cage, and I get locks almost all the time. But, and then wife gets to have all the fun of getting the babies to switch over to pinks and eat, which she hates, and probably would love to see me get out of rhinos.
It's not that I hate it. With garters, when babies come, you have to have small fish. And if you're feeding rosy reds, in the middle of summer, they're this big, which is 3 times bigger than your rhino rat. You need like 1-inch ones. And if you're raising guppies, you better have 80 billion guppies to be able to have enough to feed these guys every day. So it gets complicated and my local stores here don't carry anything but rosy reds. They don't carry feeder guppies or feeder platies. Yeah. So trying to
most stores don't. A lot of stores I feel don't carry like feeder guppies. A lot of them it's just the rosy reds and goldfish, like the comets.
Yeah, and they're all too big for baby, especially that time of the year, because you get this time of year a lot of tiny rosy reds, like the 1-inch size, become midsummer when these things hatch out, and you need tiny ones. And if you go in there and ask them to catch you something, they look at you like you're asking them to,
oh yeah,
astronomical thing. I could do it. Just hand me the net, but no, they can't do it. And they'll catch you like every damn big one in there. I try to guarantee.
And this is not a plug for them by any means, but I think I'm going to try some of that Reptilink squeezing. Okay. They got some juices and some fish squeezings and frog squeezings in a jar that sounded kind of interesting. I might play with this year just to see. It would be nice if I could get them to turn over to pinks quicker on a commercially available product.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I don't know of anyone trying that with the rhinos, so that definitely would be interesting.
Well, if you set them up so they got an elevated hunting position where they can look down into the bowl, I think I could probably make it work. That's my plan for this year. I'm going to give that a shot, see how it works.
Nice.
We'll let you know at Colubridfest.
Yeah, we'll let you know.
Okay, great. Sounds good. And speaking of Colubridfest, that is a topic I wanted to hit on tonight. I know. What was that?
And that Rob wasn't going to go.
No, not even that. Yeah. But I guess like what did you guys think of it? I know you guys are very like no ball python people, so I could only imagine that after the event you were very excited at how it turned out, how it brought the big Colubrid community together. We did a panel together. So what were your overall thoughts of the show, and how are you looking forward to it this year?
I thought it was fascinating. I haven't been to a show in 20 years that I had to look at every table. Usually when I'm at a show, I can bypass 90% of the tables and not look. So that part was great. I learned so much at the panel discussions. I thought the guy who was talking about feeding problematic feeders and talking about putting scents on a piece of paper was really fascinating. And whatever the animal would key on, he would try to feed them that thing rather than waste, 4 different items trying to offer. You just give them a scent and see where they were interested, and then you start from there. I thought that was a really a leg up to get started. And I couldn't say enough about Colubridfest. I have been the Colubridfest word spreader at every place I go. I tell everybody it was my favorite event of the year, just because it was so much fun, and I just really super enjoyed it. And Rob doesn't like to do first shows. He was very reticent about doing the show, and the day that we were going there, we had a fight. He wasn't even going to go. So he said it was stupid. We shouldn't even be doing this show because it's just going to be a waste of time. And then we went. We had absolutely wonderful time. So
I was wrong. It was a lot of fun. But
well, it was a social event. It wasn't just a sale event, which really made it fun.
And there's a lot of people there's a lot of people that will hit me up about it, and they can't wrap their head around only being able to sell for one day. And they can't wrap their head around this being more of an event, because all the events went away from that.
Yeah.
All the events went away from talkers and speakers and panels and things. And it's something that people are not used to or familiar with.
In our day, they did that. When we used to do Daytona, they always had speakers all day Saturday. They had speakers in the evenings, and they had talks, and it was a great place to learn. And then it all kind of went away from that.
But, and I kind of liked it because looking back, and through my career and stuff, some of the highlights that I have a lot of times, it's like, I can remember when we and Don Hamper went and did an IHS meeting, International Herbs Symposium, somewhere out west. I want to say St. Louis.
Yeah, it was St. Louis.
They didn't have a swap meet with that. But we loaded up our dresser drawers and everything that we had in that bedroom and closet with animals to sell. And so we wound up hearing a knock on the door, and Amy answers the door, and this guy's like, he's the president
of the IHS. I thought he was there to bust us for selling out of our room.
And he's like, hey, did Don bring any of those Timor pythons? And the next thing you know, it's a party room, and I'm laying on the bed with Bob Clark, and he's bitching to me because at that time he wasn't breeding carpet pythons, and I was. And I'm like, you're Bob Clark. And, Bob Applegate's sitting over in the corner of the room and hanging out with a bunch of the old guys. And I don't think that I gave it as much appreciation then as I do now.
No,
and those are the memories. And so Colubridfest is kind of similar to that. I mean, even when we went down and did Orlando and all that, some of the highlights I remember was, sitting around poolside or sitting down in the, in the atrium of the hotel and just bullshitting reptiles till 3 or 4 in the morning. Geez, we got to go to bed because we got to get up in the morning and sell this crap. But that was, the where we got to connect with people and friends.
You taught each other.
Yeah, and we taught each other. And back then, somebody could tell you, they were breeding, some kind of, indigo, Mexican indigo. And you go, oh my God, that's fascinating. Tell me about it. And then you would learn. And they would show, or back then we all walked around with photo albums under our arms and, hey, let me see your shit. And I'm showing, we flipped through them. And
we did.
And,
we carried photograph albums, and you'd trade albums with somebody, and you'd sit down and talk about your collection and their collection.
And a little inside story, I busted my mentor, Don Hamper, because he staged a picture with a Mandarin. And I'm like, dude, Mandarins don't lay 20 round eggs. What the hell kind of egg did you put with these Mandarins? Take this picture.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they put like corn snakes. I'm like, get that picture out of there. That's bullshit. But but it was just a very different time, and it was relaxed, and it was a community kind of a thing. It wasn't a one-upmanship shit. It wasn't a look what I breed and you don't breed, and it was just very
wasn't
different.
A lot of ego then, and now there's a lot of ego in the hobby.
Well, I think the money changed the direction.
I do too.
You know, and back in the mid '90s, I'll tell you, dude, we were making money like drug dealers. Yeah. I mean, it exploded in the mid '90s. Sure. It was nuts. The amount of money people would drop on stuff, you know, and but Colubridfest gives me some of that. I think over time, you know, last year was the first year, and it had some kinks and some problems, and I hope they found a better place. And you know, as it progresses and continues to grow, I'm hoping, and I see no reason why I won't, you know, turn into something of the past that I remember going to, that a lot of people really need to, you know, get over. The only thing about reptiles is buying and selling them, and get more into the community aspect of it. You know?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, kind of what you're saying. I feel like, you know, and I haven't been to a Tinley before. I've been to Daytona, and yes, those big shows are like a social event, but it's a little bit different. I don't know. Colubridfest just felt different. Like it felt like I was having fun with friends all weekend. It wasn't, you know, and again, I've never vended like any of the big shows, but you know, even at Colubridfest, like during the day, it still felt like a social event the whole day, because all the other vendors were walking around and talking to each other, and it was, you know, it was fun.
Well, I got to meet John Lasseter. I've known him over the internet forever. First time I've gotten to meet him face to face. I had a lot of people coming over and talk to me. I'm like, I don't know how y'all know me, but I'll talk to anybody. I got to meet Kayla from out California. That was awesome. Talk to her. So it was really a neat networking event that I think that, like so many people, I think that the people have got to just change your mindset. You know, look at it as like a reptile vacation. You're going to get to see some speakers and meet a bunch of cool stuff and hang out. And, you know, it's probably going to be some changes. It'd probably be a lot better this year than it was last year, because people know what to expect now. And get your mind out of, oh my God, you only sell them for one day. You know, that shouldn't be what it's all about to begin with.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't understand that complaint when I was originally hearing it, because I was like, you know, that, you know, the panels, like, that's part of what this is about. It's not just supposed to be about dollars and cents on that last day. Like, it's supposed to be the 3-day event, and if you want to make the most out of it, you attend the whole event, you know.
I agree 100%.
Right.
It was fantastic.
And she loved it because she would like to be a professional student, and I sucked in school, so she was taking notes and learning all kinds of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a great event, and I hope it continues to grow. And I don't see, you know, if you're on here only to find out of a sales factor, I had a phenomenal show sales wise, which absolutely shocked me. I wouldn't have expected that at all. So, you know,
and we bought stuff.
Yeah, and I bought stuff. You know, I tried to stay behind my table and not, but I did buy stuff. But you know, it was a great event. And I'm sure now, you know, I can, you know, there will probably be, you know, if you want to look at it on a sales and a market look, it's probably going to be more competitive this year. There's probably going to be more vendors there, because there wasn't that many people that wanted to take that chance last year. So, you know, but you could tell me that I'll go there and do a couple $100 and not sell nothing. I'll probably still be there, you know, because it's a good time. It's fun. And I get to see people that I don't have the time to talk to, or I don't have the ability to talk to. I mean, I could sit and, you know, I love talking to Clint, hanging out with him and Zach and a lot of those guys. And under normal circumstances, we don't have time. We're all busy with our own collections and our own lives. But for that one weekend, you know, you put it aside, and it's all about your friends, the relationship, the hobby, and the animals that you work with. And that's the best part of it.
Yeah. Going back to what you just said a minute ago, what would be animals that you're adding to your collection these days? Like, you guys are super established. Besides adding on to stuff you currently have, unless that's just the case, what would be like new species that you would add if any?
Well, I had to several years ago. I got out of a lot of my my bigger, warmer species because my room wouldn't support them, and we just had a very, very small room for a baby room. And once we had the Mandarin flood, we wound up expanding into another bedroom that stays warm to give Amy more room for her garters and her baby stuff, and me more room for big bitey bastard snakes. So I'm excitedly getting back into my Pitus. I'm excitedly getting back into my Baroni. We've got we got the Pitus mucosa in a couple of different flavors. We've got Pitus carinata coming here pretty soon that I'd like to take a whack at. I haven't drunk the Kool-Aid on the Pulsinotus and the Sustes and the different bird eaters. I haven't drunk the Kool-Aid on those yet, but Pitus just got just a crappy enough attitude to really hold my attention.
Well, they look like a cobra.
Yeah, so I like an animal that's got a little more attitude. So I'm very excitedly getting into those. Those are probably she's thrilled.
You won't regret the Phrynonax, I'll tell you that. The Bacillinotus. If you do decide to get into those, I have a pair of, they're still on the small side, but oh man, seeing the color change they're going through, they're amazing.
No, they're fascinating critters, and Jason Hood's done miraculous stuff with that entire family down in Florida. He's the cat for those. But I'm not ruling them out by any means.
He likes them.
But I think they're a fascinating animal. But I'm really stoked about getting back into the. I'm trying to put some trinket rats back together. I'm raising up a group of radiateds, which are new back into they're not new for me, but new back into the collection. And, which is all stuff that doesn't ever cool down. So I can keep those now. And then, but I'm pretty amped about my Pitus. So, so we'll see how they go.
Flavolineata.
Yeah. The Coleothignatus flavolineata, black copper rats, we're building up that.
Yeah, that was a genus I was very curious about asking you about, because I know every time I click on your Facebook page and I scroll down a little bit, it'll show me a suggested post of you hatching like black copper rats from, I think it was 2020. It's a really cool picture you have of a group of babies there. That genus is so underrated and so cool, but I think the only reason it's not more popular is because we can't get a ton of the species here.
We can't. That's a problem with it. In there, you'll have your completist collectors when those get on. That'll, I got to find subradiata, and I got to find this, and I got to find that, and you might be able to beat the bushes and turn some up of some. I'm not sure, but your average individuals, doesn't see any kind of interest in them, and that's like the black copper rats. The flavolineata are just a project of ours. Just because I just really like them, but they'll never catch on as long as they're bringing them in by the boatloads of $25 a piece that you can buy out of the wholesalers, and they're gonna croak more than likely.
Red tail greens too.
Yeah, I do want to add some red tail greens on. Everybody says, "Why don't you breed red tail greens?" I've got Jansenii, so I mean I'll probably be breeding Jansenii.
Oh, you do have some Jansenii.
Yeah, nice. maybe next year. But
very cool.
With the red-tailed green rats, everybody says, "Why don't you breed those?" Well, they need to be warmer and more humid than my main room will allow me to make them. So
we had them before we moved.
Yeah, I had them before I moved. So I'm trying to find some of those, but there was some research going on a couple of years back. I read over in Europe that were saying that they thought that female red-tailed green rats could pass on parasites through the eggshell into the neonates, and that's why a lot of the captive hatchments don't do that well. Makes perfect sense. So it's just a matter of waiting and finding somebody to breed some that I can find and pick up. But they're on my target. But they're one of those, if I get them, that's great. But I think there are species that needs to be worked with a lot more. They're very popular in the hobby.
Or they could be.
They could be. But
I had Jared on from Jared's Snake Room, Jared Carmichael. I mean, he's pumping them out like by the dozens.
Yeah. They're like, I think they're like most of those species. Once you get them going, you won't be able to stop them. I mean, there are multiple clutchers. The flavolineata are like house snakes, about like trinket rats. And, when you got a clutch hatch, and you got to have another clutch hitting the ground. That's once you get them going. And working with a friend of mine, who's having really good luck with Jansons. They will literally breed themselves to death. So he's starting to have some problems with his babies. And I'm like,
oh, really?
I think you're burning your female out. You need to split her off and not breed her for about 6 months and let her
cohabing them.
Yeah, he's cohabing them and let her build her caloric content back up, because I think you can rag them out. You'll burn them out for sure. So
is that a guy stateside here?
What's that? Yes.
Is that a guy here?
Yeah, he lives in Kansas.
Okay. Is that Daniel?
Yeah.
Schwint? Yeah.
Schwint,
okay.
yeah.
I was gonna say, because I don't know of anyone else who's like pumping them out regularly.
Daniel, I've gotten a couple animals from Daniel, and he reached out to me, and he's just starting to have babies that look very dehydrated and were very weak. He didn't understand it because the first groups that he had were doing very, very well. But these babies, he just wasn't happy with their looks, and they weren't wanting to thrive, but they were out of the same set that he's had. And I told him, and I've never seen his animals, but I'm like, well, what's the history of your female? Well, to come to find out, this female is an original import. And he said she's always been a little on the lighter side, which I don't worry about. I don't think animals got to be big and fat to breed. But he said that she was a little bit on the lighter side. And I think that animal has pumped out probably 6 or 7, clutches for him, just one right after the other, and which is typical of a lot of the animals from that area. And I told him, I go, well, I mean, you're still getting viable eggs. You're just not getting healthy babies. So, your male's doing his job. Your female, maybe you're just burning her out a little bit. She needs to take a break. So he's supposed to split her off. And he goes, well, now that you mention it, she's always been on the thinner side, and never been one to really bulk up. So, hopefully he splits them off and, give her I'd give her a 3 to 6 month break, and let her bulk back up, and then see if you start having the same problem. But I think that, I think you can easily burn these things out. They'll breed every 2 months, but
house snakes are like that too.
Yeah, but should they? No, but it's easy to fall in line letting them do that.
Right.
But so hopefully he has some pretty good luck. He reached out to me on it, and I gave him some suggestions. So hopefully he gets, because he was talking about wanting to get out of it, because he got he's one of those that he got those, he had luck, and he got really wide in a lot of different stuff. And then something might have happened in his life. I don't know. I've only met Daniel on the internet, and he was talking about selling everything. And I told him, I said, for the love of God, dude, you can sell everything you want to, but keep the Jansons. You have a knack with the Jansons. You're doing really well with the Jansons. Just work with those. And be the best producer of Jansen eye out there. And so thankfully,
he'll sell them for sure.
And thankfully for all of us, he's still in it, and maybe he'll keep pumping Jansen eye out for years and didn't, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm very happy for that for him. Plus, I know where to go to get some good captive born Jansen eye.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to the black copperas, how big do those guys get?
How big's your girls?
4 foot.
Yeah, 4 foot.
Oh yeah.
Can eat adult mice.
Yeah, or
not big. The Vietnamese and mainlands get a little bit bigger. But I'm having a hell of a time finding female mainlands. The Vietnamese are a lot prettier, but there only seems to be a handful of males sneak in, or somebody sucking up the girls when they hit the wholesalers or something. But are you going to
have those at Colubridfest or no?
Probably not. We had a little setback with it where we lost our best female. The other ones are kind of dragging their feet, so we're kind of raising a group up, and we've got a group that might be big enough.
We lost the male first. Yeah. We had a wild caught male that we lost. We have no idea how old he was. Then we had trouble finding a male. Then the female got egg bound. So then we grew up a male. So he's big enough, but the girls I have aren't quite ready yet. So
which will happen when you fall under one, that you only have one, and then when you fall under the spell of, hey, let's crank eggs out every 2 months, you wear them out, and she got tired and she egg bound up for whatever reason. And egg binding is something that I don't sweat a lot about, and I don't do anything really radical about. If I can get that animal to eat, I'll get it to pass the egg. That's the main thing. Now, I've actually got a picture where I've got an albino Chinese beauty snake squeezing a rat with an egg coming out of her rear end, popping that last one out that she was hung with. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that particular animal, I couldn't get her. It must have had an oviduct problem or something. I couldn't get her to move that egg out. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And then, so what do you think the future is for the Colugnathus genus? Do you think we'll ever be able to get more of those species in, or do you think it's limited forever?
Well, it's going to remain to be seen with all the tariff action, what that's going to do with pricing of stuff from these countries. Right. That will affect the imports.
Well, you got a letter today about that.
Yeah, but stuff like, I'm kind of on the fence either way with it. I mean, are we going to be able to find them and get it established? There's somebody out there that's got a bunch of them that don't know what they have. It's like trinket rats. I used to breed trinket rats and Aesculapian rats and Russian rats. We used to breed them in the early 90s. They were $25 animals and nobody wanted them. Mark Bell and I used to joke about, hell, we give you a free Aesculapian rat for any pine snake you ever bought because nobody wanted this crap. So it's out there. And, there's probably somebody in Canada or somebody in Europe that's got a handful of them. Radiators will snap back fast. Trinkets are kind of being a little bit of a problem to find. Simply because they're out there. I just have a really hard time spending the money that they bring. And it's not the seller's fault. I think a lot of people horribly undervalue their animals that they put time and effort into. It's just me getting over the mental hurdle of spending that kind of money on an animal I used to not be able to give away. Do I hate seeing radiators and black coppers imported into the numbers that they are? Yeah, because I know most of them are going to die.
99%.
Or most of them are going to cobra food to begin with. They're not going to do well. But, if by chance I hook into a wholesaler that got a whole herd of them in and find out when their breeding season actually is, and they get a clutch of eggs and I can buy captive hatch babies from some imported animals, I'll do it in a heartbeat, but I won't buy any adult. Because they're not going to do it. But I think that a lot of times goes back to what we were talking about with a negative look on some of the stuff we work with. These people go to a swap meet and they see an imported radiated rat on some cat's table. It's 4 foot, kind of a cool looking snake. It's $45. They might see me with a calf born for $125, $150, $200. It's a baby. And they'll buy that big one and it'll die. And then they've immediately had a negative experience with an old
never
world,
do it again.
and they're done. They're all garbage. They're all imported. And they're all garbage. So it kind of backhandedly affects us a little bit.
And you also get what you pay for.
And you get what you pay for. But a lot of people buy price first and what they're getting second.
I've always said that about like the import stuff on the tables, because like you get that keeper with one bad experience and then, I actually wonder what the statistic is like, where do people go? Is it like 50% never keep a reptile again because they're so pissed, or 50% of them keep buying cheap animals and killing them? Like, I don't know. There's probably a small percentage that actually learn from their mistake and like then buy captive stuff. But
and it would be interesting to know. And there's been a lot of stuff come to light about some vendors and sellers out there and stuff.
Yes.
And the best thing, if some shows aren't going to get rid of them. Some shows are always going to be there. And all you can really do is hope that people, take the entire collection on, under review, look at their entire table, look at their entire collection, and try to shop a little smarter, I feel sorry for these people like that'll say, I saw this tokay gecko on this table and it looked so bad. I bought it to try to save its life and it was $3 and it died. Well, now not only have you had a negative, but not only have you had a negative experience, but you just given a reason for the dude that sold the half dead tokay to keep selling them,
to go buy another one
because you bought it. So I know it's horrible and it's out there, and I see it at every show from Tenley on down. If you want to stop it, then quit buying it.
Yeah, don't buy it.
And then these people, maybe they'll dry up and go away, but there'll always be flippers and meat market cats out there. And, and I'm friends with a bunch of them. I may not buy nothing from them, but I'm friends with a bunch of them. But, it's just because I've been in it too long. But it's, and it kind of goes back sadly to the dollar before the animal. It's all about selling the animals and not so much about having a positive experience with them. And I think that's what people need to look more for, and maybe try to educate people more to not buy that type of stuff instead of spending so much time. Because it's like, if you ever look at any of my posts, I never, hardly ever post a picture of my facility. I don't, because I'm a tubber. Now, most of my stuff is in oversized tubs, like 808 male bellow racks for Chinese beauties. That's a big ass cage with a lot of ventilation for a relatively small animal. But I don't want to hear the blowback. I don't want to hear people. But I tell people it's like tropical fish. There's as many ways to keep tropical fish as there is to keep reptiles.
Well, if you had to keep every single snake in a 6 foot by 6 foot by 4 foot cage, you couldn't afford to buy what I produced.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly.
And that's kind of what I tell people, that, there was a post on Old Time Herpers, a Lloyd Lemke and his setup, a bunch of cats that are notorious for crushing people got on there with negative comments. And I'm like, if it wasn't for square foot gardening by Lloyd, by Sipperly, by Mark Bell, by, Bill Brandt, by all these cats that did it back in the early days, we couldn't afford, Amel corns wouldn't be $25. Florida Kings wouldn't be $25. And it worries me too. I hate seeing a lot of people throwing around the standards word, because the standards word, to me, kind of simulates that there's something really wrong and somebody needs to take a look at it. Now, if you start looking at having to go by AAZPA standards and stuff, if that's the laws that you want to have, and every snake I have has got to have an 8x2x2 cage,
wasn't it twice the length of the snake's body? Then
all of a sudden I can't produce anything. And what I can produce instead of numbers becomes fewer, and the price is going to quadruple
or more.
It's just the way that it goes. So, you don't have to try to make a name for yourself roasting people out there. If you want to do different, do different. I tell people all the time, you're a different keeper than I am. I'm a breeder. You're a hobbyist. I want you to have that beauty snake in a nice big paludarium in your living room. That's great. Set it up and make it something you enjoy. You don't want something utilitarian looking like crap in your living room. You want something nice and enjoy it. But there's so many ways that you can do it, and do it well. And the animals don't suffer, and the animals do well. I've got 20, 25-year-old, beauty snakes down there in my room. They live just as long, do just as well. But, I'm a fish nerd. I love tropical fish. I've kept them and I've bred them. And, if I want to pump out angelfish and hatch eggs every 7 days, I'll put them in a 20-gallon tank with a piece of slate, and that's all they'll get. And they'll sit there and breed themselves to death and be happy to do it. But do I want to see that in my living room? No, not really. So there's just a lot of ways that you can go about doing it. And, and I think education, stop bashing and try to educate a little bit harder.
Well, I think that's what Colubridfest was such an interesting thing. It was a dedicated group of keepers that were more educated, and they came there knowing about colubrids and kind of knowing the basics. And I'm not saying that beginners couldn't come and have a great time, but it was just a really neat collection of people that weren't looking for the cheapest thing on the table. They were looking for the thing that they wanted. Yeah. And they were educated, and it was easy to talk to them.
Mm-hmm. Big time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I want to kind of go into my wrap-up questions, and then we're getting towards that time. So, you guys have been doing this for a very long time, as we've talked about, but what keeps the fire burning, for what keeps you motivated with reptiles to this day and moving forward?
Go ahead, boy.
I think education. A lot of it's education. We did that show at Rexpo this past weekend, and Rob had a little boy hold his first snake, and that's always fun. Getting to people to experience that, I mean, we have people that came in our pet shop that were kids, and now they're grown up and they've got, grown up kids. And it's really fun to have them come back and say, hey, we came to your pet store in 1984 and, we bought your whatever and we raised it up. And now, we see you here and there and yonder. So that's really the fun part for me, was being able to do that.
Now, for me, I come across as I'm not a super outgoing people person. But if you give me trapped at a show, I'll talk to you about anything. But for me, it's the animals. I still get the same excited feeling when I go down and I have animals breeding or I pull eggs out, to sit there and look and think that under my care and my tutelage, these animals were happy enough and healthy enough to produce and procreate and they'll do it on their own. If I stay out of the way, they'll do it on their own. But I still get, to me, it's all about the animals. It's all about breeding the animals. It's all about trying new projects.
Well, that's exciting for sure.
Yeah, for me, it's that. And so, I try to put on something new every year, something different. Sometimes I gravitate towards it. Sometimes it doesn't do as well, and I move it on out, or it's not what I'm looking for. But to me, it's just the animals. It's just working with them, and I could, I could be the dude that could be the happy grumpy dude that putters around in his basement breeding snakes, and you never see him, and he's known for breeding a couple of cool things once in a while. But that's for me. Wife is actually the front person,
right.
She can be the face, but for me, I don't enjoy doing the shows. I mean, I've done them for very long. There's little excitement for me when I go to a show.
A traditional show.
Colubridfest was different because it gave me a little bit more of a throwback, but I don't sit and count down the minutes till I get to do another show. And, because they're hard on me, they're hard on the animals. But it's something that we've got to do. But that to me is the animals. Part of it.
Yeah. And I forgot to ask this in like the mix. Because I know you guys don't do a lot of online sales to my knowledge. I don't know if you just have people that kind of hit you up and you'll ship snakes. Do you ship snakes, or are you solely like show sales?
No, we ship stuff before COVID hit. I would say about 75% of what I produced went to China and Japan, went overseas.
Okay.
I had quite a few buyers. Now, since COVID hit, I'm not sure. Well, I know one of the guys, last I heard, was doing some jail time. He's recently got out. But a couple of the other guys, I haven't seen. I don't know if they passed away. I don't know if they've shifted gears and gone a different direction. So I got very complacent with that, and it was very easy. Here's a bunch of money, send it to Florida. I don't got to hear from you again. I sent a bunch of stuff over to Europe. But now I'm looking at a little more online stuff.
But we can't ship during the summer because
I'm very picky about my shipping. I know a lot of people will ship 24, 7, 12 months a year. Right. I'm just not comfortable with it. My stuff doesn't want to be hot. I don't want my stuff lost in Memphis at 100 degrees. So typically I ship from April to probably June, and then I ship maybe September to November. Yeah. And then I'm done. Gotcha. I only ship about 6 months out of the year.
Okay.
But we can arrange to have animals taken to a lot of different shows. We've got friends that do them. And
I do have a friend of mine that is a full-time reptile guy, and he travels all over the United States and drives more than I could humanly understand why anybody wants to. But I can get a lot of things delivered by courier fee that way. I'm trying to find the format I want to go to. There's some things out there that I like, things out there that I don't like. But a lot of that comes into, I said we were doing a lot of moving around here, and our office has been puked into by stuff. So I have to get the office open back up so we can, Amy can actually start doing her online sales again. But I tell most people I don't belong to any groups on Facebook.
Oh no.
You won't find me on nothing. I figure that if you have even the glimmer of interest in anything that I work with, you'll find me. And if you want to ask me if I've got something, I'll tell you. and I'll make a list and I'll get a hold of you when I got it.
Well, you also post pictures of what's breeding.
And I
what's
post
hatching.
pictures of stuff that's laid and hatching and stuff. But I need to get a better platform for selling. I do. But you know how us old guys are. We're very slow to want to change and get up with the times. So
you're not that old, for Pete's sake.
But the thing is, I have a pretty good setup here, and where I differ from a lot of breeders, and I've told people this at shows, I don't have to sell my stuff. If I don't sell to the show, it's got a box at home. I'll take it back home. I'll feed it for 6 months. You know, Tanley, everybody, usually October Tanley, everybody's like, hey, you want to wholesale? You want to wholesale? And there's some things I wholesale, some things I won't. And I go, well, I'll wait until you got it in March and then I'll buy it. And I go, March is going to be 3 times bigger and I'm going to charge you twice as much. Yeah. But so I don't really sweat to move. I don't produce more than I can house. I don't produce more than I can keep. And if I have to sit on it a while, I have to sit on it a while. I don't worry about it. I have a full-time job. Thank God I'm looking to retire from in about 4 years. So this is not my livelihood. So
you don't have to.
So I don't have to push the stuff out. I'm content with it. And to be honest with you, I like everything that I breed, and I'd keep it all if I could. You know, but I just can't. I can't keep it all. So if you breed crap you really don't like, you want to sell it, get rid of it. But I like everything I breed. And people are like, well, you should cut your collection down, put them in cages where you enjoy it more. And I'm like, that means I got to get rid of something. And I don't have anything down there that I don't like. So it's impossible to me to figure out what I want to cut. You know, so
yeah. And generally, best place for people to reach you guys would be Facebook.
Probably Zerkle Reptile Co. on Facebook. I get a lot of people who want to friend me on my Facebook page. If you want to see grandkids and trips and goofy facts and probably some boob memes, you'll find that on my name. But if you want to see anything that's snake and related, you got to go to Zerkle Reptile Company. Yeah. And then our email address is the same email that we've had since we got our first computer. It's the word reptile, the number 4, me at AOL.com. And it does actually still function at AOL.com. Yes. It does.
Nice.
32 years.
All right.
32. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then
cool.
we're usually around shows, like I said, if you're interested in anything and you're in California, I probably got a buddy of mine going out there. I can get stuff to you. But we're at Tanley. We're a permanent fixture at Tanley. We'll do Rexpo. We do a few over in PA, and we're at the Ohio shows every month.
Schaumburg show. We put on
we'll be in Schaumburg.
We put on the Cleveland show, and we'll be in the Columbus show.
So I'm around.
Very cool.
And we'll be at Colubridfest.
And we'll be at Colubridfest, I guess.
Yes, you will. Cool. All right. What is the future for Zerkle Reptile Company look like? Would you say in the next 3 to 5 years? Is it kind of just keep the train moving in the same direction? Do you have grand old plans? What would you say in the short term?
What?
Well, Rob wants to add things on. He always has aspirations to add things on, and now that we have the bigger room, it's a warm room there. He has projects that he wants to put in, and I'll be taking care of babies. Yep. Lots of babies.
Yeah. I don't see any drastic changes. I'm not jumping into pythons or boas anytime soon.
Right.
I'll probably keep breeding the same stuff. I do see probably maybe in the next 5 years or so, maybe trimming numbers. I don't know. We'll have to see, when the time comes. It's hard for me to say that, and this would be very contradictory. If I want to breed reptiles up till the day I die, I'm not sure. It is a lot of work. Wife and I do it on our own. I'm taking care of probably 300 or 400 animals on my own. Wife's got her old herd that she deals with, so as you get older, we don't, none of my kids took any real interest in it, which was fine. I wasn't forcing them on it. Most of my grandkids don't live really anywhere near me. So there's not like someone I'm going to leave it to, but I could see probably cutting it down a little bit over the course of time. Okay. But there's some things when you see, but I tell people all the time,
but you're not there yet.
When you see me not having any beauty snakes, you see me selling a bunch of adult beauty snakes, then that's the day I'm out of it. Beauty snakes are the one thing
That's never happened.
One thing I will never not have is
Yeah.
beauty snake. So
okay. Cool. And then like my last and final question is really like what's your elevator pitch, whether it's someone who has never kept a colubrid before, someone who's never kept a reptile before. Why colubrids?
What do you think? Go ahead.
Well, I find that they're very interactive. Like I told you before, when we had that green tree boa, it just really, it was not interested in what I was doing. And I think the snakes that we have are as interested in what we're doing as we're interested in them. So it's a really interesting relationship that you have with that animal. They're very perceptive. They watch you. They're interactive. It makes it really a lot of fun to keep them. Whereas the mandarins are a little more fossorial and a little more reticent to come out. The rat snakes are always out. The garters are always out. They're always curious. They're watching everything that you do. You know, they're periscoping up and all peering out to see around the corner what's happening. So it makes them very, it just makes them a lot of fun. And I can see that people that were afraid of snakes, you know, you can put something in their hand like that little Consensus garter and they're enchanted with it and they go home with it and it becomes, you know, a treasure part of their family. And that's what really makes it very, I think, endearing to me to watch that happen. And I hear it all the time. And it's the same thing with beauty snakes. You know, people talk about, somebody just told Rob the other day that they had gotten this beauty snake and that it wasn't at all like they thought it was going to be. It was just great. And they had listened to his podcast and they got, was it a Taiwan? Yep. And they're just amazed with it. And now they just want more.
Awesome. For me, you know, when the 98th percentile has had their ball pythons and you understand what a ball python is and what it does. And I do not knock ball pythons. They're great snake. Now that you can get them captive born, they're probably the best starter snake out there. I can't knock them.
Yeah.
But if you try a colubrid and you see that their personality and their lifestyle of any colubrid, pick one, doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Any colubrid out there, that their personality and lifestyle is 180 degrees different than you've experienced with your ball python. That will usually kick your interest into maybe, you know, diving into a few colubrids. Do you need to, you know, to hit your head and get stupid with beauty snakes like I have? Not necessarily, but, you know, don't be afraid to go out there and try something different. Give it a whirl. You might like it, you might not. I can sit here and tell you I love old world snakes. Do I love and keep every single one I've ever had? Absolutely not. You know, I've had some and I get them and I breed them and I go, well, they're okay, but they didn't really flip my switch and I move them down the line. But, you know, don't be afraid to step out your comfort zone and try something a little bit different. And, you know, you might wind up getting hooked on something that you didn't see coming, you know, be it a garter snake or being a beauty snake. You know, when you're used to what everybody likes to tag as pet rocks and you look at an animal and it's actually moving around and watching you and begging and periscoping and doing all the things that colubrids do, you might find that you're a little bit enchanted. And all you breeders out there that want to get out of ball pythons, don't. They're the number one snake in the world. They're the number one snake in a hobby. They've done more for this hobby than anything I'll ever put on the table.
Oh, they're a great way.
But they'll get people a gateway into keeping other stuff. Mm-hmm. And so don't be afraid to try something new. Try something a little bit different. You might get it and you might love it. You might get it, you might hate it, but you won't know unless you try it.
Absolutely.
I agree.
All right. And with that, guys, I think that kind of concludes tonight's episode. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
You, Joe.
Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this one was a long time coming, especially since we did that the panel together. But I definitely appreciate your guys' time. Thank you very much. Anything else you want to say to the audience listening now or later?
If you have questions, you're always welcome to contact us, and we're happy to answer questions about, you know, animals that you have or are curious about. And, you know, we've been here. We're going to be here. We're not going anywhere.
And don't go to sleep on Colubridfest, and be sure to follow Joe. He does a lot of cool stuff with his podcast. Give him a like. He's a good young up-and-comer. That's coming from an old guy like me. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I'm going to throw you in the backstage here, run the outro, and we can talk for a couple minutes afterwards.
Sounds great. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right. Well, guys, what another fantastic episode here of the Colubrid Corruption podcast. I hope you all enjoyed tonight. Me with the Zerkles. I thought it was a great conversation having them on. Like I said, I was looking forward to that episode for a while and glad we were able to make it happen. So yeah, but again, guys, make sure you go follow Zerkle Reptile Company over on Facebook to see a little more of what they do. Make sure you leave a like and hit that subscribe button on the podcast tonight. Let you know, and hit the notification bell so you know every single time we go live and drop a new episode. Again, you could also listen to this on Apple, Spotify, all the major audio podcasting platforms. Leave a 5-star review on there. Again, first link in the description goes to the Meteoric Serpents Patreon if you want to join that. But yeah, guys, that does it for tonight. Again, this was episode number 61 of the Colubrid Corruption podcast with the Zerkles, Rob and Amy. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.